you so much for joining me today. To start out, what is your name?
Good morning. My name is Jennifer.
Jennifer? Okay. And Jennifer, you're going to tell me a story about your son with mental health. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do
I
you
sure
have
am.
other children in addition to him?
I do. I have 4 kids. My 2 oldest were diagnosed with mental illness within about a year and a half of each other.
And so when you got that diagnosis right within a year and a half of each other, was the older one diagnosed first and the one, or?
Yes, as is common with a lot of the mental illnesses, health, or let me say physiology will say that some of these mental illnesses are developed between 18 to 22, especially for males, when the frontal lobe part of the brain is finishing to develop. And it's they're both sons. It was textbook. The oldest was diagnosed first, and he was 21. And then the second one, Luca, was diagnosed right behind him a year later when he was 20. So.
Okay. Wow. So you said it was textbook. What was their actual diagnosis?
The oldest, I'll never forget either, is schizophrenia. And I'll never forget the day our whole family was in the car, me and my 4 kids. And he said something to the effect of, "Did you hear that him cuss?" We were at a wedding, and he said, "Did you hear the preacher at that one point?" And he started cussing at the couple. And he was serious. And the boys joked a lot between themselves, but he was not joking. And we all just said, "No, we didn't hear that." And he insisted. We understood after a little bit he wasn't joking. And then from there, you don't really believe it, what's going on. And you're like, "No, he probably just had a headache, or it was a bad day," or you look for all kinds of excuses. And then finally, we started getting him help. And he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And then Luca, who actually is right behind me, I didn't do that on purpose. That's Luca, my
Aw.
son. Yeah. He was diagnosed with bipolar. And unfortunately, a year and a couple of months ago, on April 3rd, 2019, he killed himself.
Okay. Um, so how old was he when he passed away?
He was 23.
23, and he was diagnosed at 20. So 3 years. Wow.
Yes. So he did a stint. I remember, again, even though we had dealt with Lorenzo, Luca was just in Lorenzo too. Lorenzo was a classical pianist. He was starting to prepare auditions for Juilliard. It's a long process, and you have to record it. And he had started those with his piano teacher. He had been playing since he was 8, and he had to stop that. And Luca went through a little bit of a depression. He actually ended up at UT Austin School of Business. He had worked 3 jobs. He was brilliant, just brilliant. He loved people. People loved him. And he started going through a little bit of depression when Lorenzo was diagnosed. And I just thought it was for the love of his brother. But then it got bad. His mind got bad. And like so many people with mental illness do, they self-medicate. Our communities tend to sometimes just be very down on people who abuse alcohol or drugs, but they self-medicate because their brains just won't stop. And a lot of times, the only way to get their brains to stop for a minute and give them some just relief at all is these drugs and alcohol. So Luca started doing that a little bit. I think he took a lethal dose, lethal in the sense of it really damaged his brain, of LSD.
Okay.
And he never came back. Bipolars have their mood swings, but he never came back to normal. And he wrestled courageously in my eyes. He's one of the most courageous person people I know. He really wanted to live, and he fought with it for so long and just couldn't any longer. So
Wow. Gosh, well, I am so sorry that he is not here to tell us his story, but I'm so thankful that you're willing to share his story with us and with all the people that are going to see this, because he is a fighter, and I think other parents can see that and maybe can kind of learn from what you have been through to help them
yeah,
with their child as well. Can you
I
tell
hope
me
so.
a little, yeah, can you tell me a little bit about getting the diagnosis? What was involved with that? I'm guessing it's not like just going to the doctor and taking a, strep swab and okay, you've got strep
You know,
and you leave. I'm sure there's quite a bit more involved. Can you talk about that a little bit?
sure. It's a very laborious process. Not only the diagnosis, but also the medications. I mean, we're talking years, really. And it's very hard, especially for my kids, they're in their formative years. They're not little children, but they're in a very sensitive period of life where they're trying to figure out what they're going to do, who they might marry. Luca had all those dreams as well. So telling somebody that it's going to take years to figure this out or months is very, very discouraging. And so you really have to, even though you yourself as a parent might be discouraged, because it's hard, all those dreams that you had for your kid, of the normal, and I say that in quotes,
Right.
of growing up and having a family and having grandkids and going to school and having a job. That's not our normal, and it never will be our normal. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's just letting go of that dream is really, it's hard, and it's a process. But our diagnosis with Lorenzo, we started. I first of all, you're like, how do I even start finding a
Yeah.
psychiatrist? What does my insurance cover? And we were very blessed. I looked for one close by that my insurance would cover, and we found one. And he started with Lorenzo. We went through because of the voices that he heard. I mean, he literally heard voices, and um, it was pretty clear for Lorenzo. For Luca, it was a little different because what happened with Luca was he took this lethal dose and he went completely crazy, wouldn't sleep. It was what they were saying was a manic episode, and a manic episodes is when they don't sleep. And I'm a nurse and I'm doing 12 hours. I was a night shift, and it was very, very hard to deal with because, I have to sleep. My job, I have people's lives at stake, and yet here's my child whose life is at stake as well. And it was one of the most difficult things in my life. My other kids, I have another son, and my daughter especially really, really helped a lot. But we had to put him into a mental hospital at Shoal Creek, which he hated. I don't know if he ever forgave me for that, but he had to stay there for 3 weeks. And they diagnosed him originally with schizophrenia, and because of his brother. And they said usually it's hereditary and genetic, but the medications that Lorenzo took, my oldest, were not working with Luca. And so they changed the diagnosis. But and again, mental illness is very, very difficult because it's a matter of observing behaviors.
Right.
It's a matter of trying a diagnosis and seeing if it works and seeing if the medications work with that diagnosis. So again, it's a very long process, and we went through it. And even Luca, I'm just, again, even they called me with autopsy results and said that he had his psych meds in his system. He tried. I was there. He took his meds. He did what he needed to do, which is not typical of bipolar. They usually won't take their meds.
Right.
And it wasn't the right thing. And before we could try something else, he was just done. So diagnosis and medications, very, very laborious process, but you just have to settle in. You just have to say, this is my new normal. And, you know, find a way to keep yourself motivated and not discouraged because they need you so much.
They do. Yeah, and I can't I've never gone through a mental health diagnosis like that, but I can just imagine that there's so much not only on the medical side trying to get the diagnosis and the medications, but there's a lot of stigma that's attached to mental health
Yes.
as well. Did
Yes.
you feel at any point like people were judging you or your family because of the mental health?
Always.
Yeah,
Always. There were many people who didn't. So I do want to say that and be fair. But there is such a negative and mostly the reason why is because people think that these people don't want to do what it takes to take their medicine to be well, and that's so untrue. I mean, if you think about the most stressful point in your own life and you think about having to deal with that with no reprieve, no relief, if you think of that is what these people are going through, there is no I'm just going to go watch TV and relax a little bit. They don't get that. My kids used to love to watch TV, and there's something about their brain that they just don't get a reprieve from that. And I think there's a lot of stigma, like you said, and judgment that these people they're there in that situation sometimes because they just want to be or because they don't want to do what it takes to get out of it. They aren't trying hard enough. Um, and I know for a fact, after living for it and living through it, that Luca, especially, and Lorenzo as well. Lorenzo is very focused and functional and takes his medications and doesn't stay up and doesn't drink alcohol that could react with it. These my boys, they want what everybody else wants. They want to be loved. They want to have friends. They want to be accepted, and a lot of times they don't because people don't know how to deal with mental illness as well. I don't know. There's not anger or there's just frustration. They're just like anyone else. So,
yeah. And I think it's definitely getting better where people are a little bit more understanding, but
hmm
yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done
hmm
in our community,
absolutely.
society to overcome all of that. So I'm sure that added a lot more stress to an already stressful situation, which doesn't make it any better.
Very,
It makes it worse.
very much, very much. Yes.
So you mentioned that you're a nurse. Were you a nurse
Mhm.
before they got diagnosed and before they started having symptoms, or did you become a nurse later?
So, just a quick little, maybe too much information, but I'm a nurse. I went to I'm a This is my second career. We lived in Italy. My kid's father is Italian, and so we were in Italy, and we came back to the United States after that marriage failed, and I went to nursing school. So while I was in nursing school is when Lorenzo was diagnosed first. I'm trying to remember.
While you were in
But I
school.
What's that?
It was while you were in school.
Yes, while I was
Mhm.
in school, Lorenzo was diagnosed first. And I very specifically remember Luca, especially when he was in Shoal Creek. I was in my third semester of nursing school. And I remember it because I would go to school and go to Shoal Creek every day. And I remember taking an exam and having to stay up late to study for the exam and then going um, to Shoal Creek. And then when I received my license, Luca attempted to kill himself a first time. It was my first job on night shift, and then I switched jobs to the hospital, and that's the night shift is when I the second time that he was successful, unfortunately. So,
Wow.
mhm.
Gosh. Um, do you think because you were in nursing school, you were able to identify their behaviors and like the triggers that that you saw, or do you think that that was more just, hey, something's off, my kid's not acting normal? Like, how do you feel like you recognize that this isn't just my kids being odd, but I need to seek, a professional help with this? How did you identify that as a mom?
That is a great question. And honestly, I was in nursing school and we had gone into mental illness extensively at our school, but you don't recognize it. I didn't recognize it with learn. You just don't think this is what happening. And again, it goes back to that dream of, I was still dreaming what every parent dreams for their kids. And I wasn't the parent who said they had to do this and they had to do this, they have to do the 4-year college. I wanted them to be happy, but I knew that they wanted families of their own. They'd always talked about, even when they were little, they loved being a part of a large family, large Italian family, and they wanted to have their own large Italian families. And they would dream. They had dreams.
Absolutely.
And when it started to happen, you don't want to let go of that dream.
No, you
You
don't.
don't. That's
Yeah, you
that's
don't.
the hardest, one of the hardest things. But there's a lot of healing, and even for them, they know that you're holding on to that dream. But when you let go and you say, "This is it, and it's okay. We have today, and we're gonna have good, happy moments today, even though you're suffering." And we would, go out and walk and talk. And so being a nurse has helped me um, especially with Luca. I feel like I was way more in tune with his diagnosis. I really feel like he damaged his brain. And so then that's why the medications didn't work anymore. That's why nothing really helped anymore with him. And so I feel like at that point, being a nurse helped me. But even more, honestly, being a nurse has helped me because it's helped me keep perspective. It's helped me realize there's so many people out there that are in this boat, and we just don't realize it. And um, I love it when I get these patients on my floor, and it's hard for some nurses to deal with, and I don't mind that. I don't judge them. I know that's hard if you haven't had to deal with it before, but I really want these people, when we get them. So it's helped me as a nurse in that way for sure.
That's really good. And I'm sure those patients really are glad that you're their nurse as well. And they can tell when the nurse taking care of them wants to be there or doesn't. So I'm sure that makes a big difference for them. I'm
I
I'm
hope
sure.
so.
I'm sure it does. Um, in all of this and identifying and then seeking out help, getting diagnosis, figuring out the medications, and ultimately, in the no longer being here, what types of support and resources did you find helpful? Was there anything that was, really helpful to you through all of this?
um, So, I tried a couple times. Lorenzo tried to get involved. There's an organization, and I'm actually a volunteer with them. Right now, it's kind of hard because of COVID, but NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, is an excellent, excellent resource. They have done so much good, and they're working so hard to decrease even the stigma for these people. Who We all suffer depression, we all suffer some sort of mental difficulties, even at some time. Mental illness is different because it really is a true chemical alteration in the brain. But NAMI is amazing because they offer family groups, they offer peer groups. I'm involved. They were training me to go speak to groups of people, other parents, or even other kids, just to get the voice out there and say you are not alone. It's so hard. Our communities, or some of our society, we tend to look at the pretty and the beautiful all the time. There's so many of us out there that are struggling, and so NAMI is a great resource. I wasn't as involved as I wanted to be because of being a nursing student and then a nurse, and it's a very, very, very hard schedule, and it's, hard. Lorenzo was willing to try. Our local group, because we're kind of out of the city, they didn't have a bunch of schizophrenics. It was mainly major depression people, and so he didn't feel very comfortable, but he was willing to try. Luca never wanted to try anything, and so for them, we didn't really have enough time because we're still working on psychiatrists and medications and day-to-day function. But NAMI for me, on going on longer, has been really supportive. Honestly, too, I don't know if a lot of people get this, but my workplace has been amazing, and I'm one of these people that I I can't hide the way that I'm feeling every day. I don't take it to work. I don't cry in a patient's room, but I do have a hard time, and I'll just say I'm sad today, or I lost my son. And I mean, it might make somebody uncomfortable, but that's me. And most everybody at my workplace has been absolutely amazing. Because I am the main breadwinner for the family, I had to go back to work 10 days after he died. I'm sorry, 10 days after he died. And that has stuck with me really. And I had to, but everybody was so amazing. So, they let me go back starting light duty, which meant I was just kind of stalking and didn't have to do patients, because if I did need to break down, I could go in a room and cry. So I'm really thankful that I work with healthcare providers, that they were sensitive to me. Even the doctors were great. And, so I've had that really good support too. Not people who fully understand what's going on, but were supportive regardless. So.
It's really good. Yeah, a lot of people don't have that. So that's really good
Yeah.
that you have that.
Yes.
So with mental health, it's not a curative disease. You can't go and get fixed and be over it.
Right.
So with it being, once you have it, you're dealing with it for life. Do you feel like with Lorenzo, do you feel like it's to be something that you're gonna kind of figure out, be able to pretty much stabilize, or do you think that there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows in his needs and his care overall?
I definitely think, again, especially with Luca's death, um, it's been such a long process in my mind as a mom. Um, and I'm at a very good point right now where I know that he'll probably always be with me, because he won't get better. I mean, he is my functional kid, but he has no filter. And I was talking with a coworker who has an autistic son who's young, and he's so cute. And she shows me pictures of him, and he'll act out, and it's cute because he's like 6 or something. And she said, but I know he's going to grow up and he's not going to be cute anymore. And people don't like it when people are older and acting like children, and they don't get it. And so one of my biggest fears is that Lorenzo's going to be beat up or something out there in the world. Um, he tries to maintain as much independence as possible, but he doesn't have a filter. And, we go over and I talk to him about this all the time, about things he can say and can't say, but his mind just doesn't make those connections all the time. He currently he is 26. He'll be 27 this year. He's living with me. The only job he can keep is a fast food job, and he has lost a couple of even those, for comments made, or one of the voices that he hears, or I call them triggers, is the word "sir." Well, we live in the South, and people use that as respect. We have spent hours, all of us, talking about them and trying to reason with him about it's sir, and it's people, they're trying to treat you well. It doesn't matter. That's his voice. That's his trigger. And so he gets really upset about this word if they use it with him at work. And so he's lost a couple of jobs. I mean, and granted, he's not a paranoid schizophrenic, which they say can sometimes be dangerous. He's more down on himself, but he is able to keep this job. And so he'll always need me. He'll always need me to provide for him. And probably eventually his siblings, his younger siblings, once I'm gone, they kind of know that they'll stay with him and help him out. So he's functional, and he does well. He's actually very social despite it all. If he finds a few friends out there, his piano playing, I wish. He is so brilliant, and he writes his own songs. He plays, his favorite composer is Chopin, and he likes Mozart and Beethoven too. But and then he writes his own pieces that are just absolutely amazing. He's
Wow.
written, he started writing a book about being diagnosed with schizophrenia and the way his brain, he says, turned on him. It's in Italian, and I'm trying to get him to finish. I would like to translate it. It's just such an amazing, amazing insight. And these people are so mentally ill. People are just, they have so much to offer, and yet we just don't see it all the time. So
Which I hate that happens, because they are, and they're bright and they're talented and they're wonderful people, and it's hard
yeah.
for them to get past all of their challenges for the world to see that. So I'm so thankful that you're sharing their story so that the world can see that, he's a amazing music player, piano player. What was Luca's favorite things to do? You said he was in business school. What was his favorite thing to do?
So Luca, as you can see in this picture, he's kind of a big guy right there, but he that was some of the meds. But before that, when he was at UT,
Mhm.
beautiful Italian. I mean, people were so attracted to him his whole life, ever since he was a kid. And he just, oh, he was so good with people, and he loved people. He actually worked as a coach for little kids after school,
Aw.
kind of like the YMCA, and that was his most favorite job, and everybody loved him, all the parents, all the kids.
Aw.
He was so, so good at that. But he also sang. He worked at Olive Garden, which we were all like, that's not Italian food. He
Yep.
loved that. He loved that to kind of help put himself through school, and he would sing. He would serenade people, and he beautiful Italian songs.
Wow.
He played the guitar, and he acted in some of his friends' films, and he was just so full. He lived, I mean, so much the 23 years that he did. He even told me, probably it was a week to 10 days before he died. He said, I have had such an amazing life. He said, I loved my child. It was a gift. It was a gift to me. And that's a little comforting, because knowing that he did have good things to remember too. So yeah,
Absolutely. And I know, as a parent that's lost a child, those are the things that I hold on to. It's the little glimpses that you can kind of look back on all the happy things and the wonderful things. Those are how I get through the day. Um, but
that's right.
um, if you were to run into a family, and you mentioned that you're being trained, or hopefully when COVID's over you can get back to being trained to speak to families and children, or younger people, newly diagnosed, what would you tell them? What do you wish you could go back and tell yourself? What would you tell them to try to help them through this?
So I'm really glad you asked me this, because again, as a nurse, I've seen some families go through it, and I'll be honest. When these things first started happening, you also have some anger, and your anger is towards your child, because you think you don't understand yet. You don't understand what's going on. And what you might see is behavior acting out, substance abuse. And so you're angry and you're like, why are you doing this? And it's not the usual. It's it's just it seems like they're doing everything they shouldn't do, before you really understand the diagnosis or what is going on. But my biggest advice is there's a lot of us, and as a parent, we feel like we have to discipline our kid. We have a few years time, and if we don't discipline them, then they're going to be these rogue people. I grew up very strict, you can tell. Some people don't, do that, but I grew up in a home where we disciplined, and there was a lot of love, but there was discipline too. So I started out that way, and sometimes if I'm really having a hard day and I'm feeling sorry for myself, I really get upset at myself because I wasted time being mad at my kid for something.
I know.
Sorry.
No, I
He, he
understand.
just he couldn't help, you know. So my biggest piece of advice, don't be mad at your kid. Love them, and their world is so hard already. Be their biggest cheerleader. Just be there, and it's going to be hard for you too. So make sure you find a way to support yourself. Whether it be through a group, whether it be through your family, whether it be through a partner, um, but don't have those same regrets. So if there's any regrets that I have, it would be that. It would just be their biggest cheerleader. Their life is going to be hard from now on, and they need somebody on their side. They need somebody to help them through it. So, yes, they do. I had to be on Luca to take his meds, and I actually got to a point where I'm going to watch him. He's going to take him, and he was fine with that. He actually was okay. And, if you're going to live in this house, then you're going to have to do this. A lot of parents will kick their kids out. And I see it in the hospital too. I see people with mental illness, and they've come in and they've burned all their bridges because their family doesn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. And there's got to be a way that you can keep that connection with them and help them. And it's a hard balance. I am not saying it's easy, but it's worth your while. It is. I feel like at the end for Luca especially, he knew he was loved. He knew he was loved. And because I had come full circle with this mental illness and understood it better, I was able to just love him. And I didn't feel like I had to, you know, keep control of everything that he did. And I knew that substance abuse was going to be a part of our lives. I knew it. And I'm not saying I condone that, but I knew that. And instead of just being down on him, because they are down on themselves already, they are, I guarantee you, they are down on themselves already. So instead of just being down on him, I loved him and helped him. I did set boundaries, and he would cross those boundaries sometimes, but I would fight for those boundaries again. Um, and that's my biggest. Be their cheerleader. Be for them. Be on their side. They need you.
I think that's great advice, and yeah, it's something I think every parent should consider, especially dealing with mental health, but really all parents,
Mhm.
just
Yeah,
be there for your kid. I think that's a
absolutely.
great advice. Before we kind of wrap up, is there anything else about Luca or Lorenzo, or about this journey that you're on? And I mean, you're going to be on this journey for the rest of your life. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with other families or just about them?
I would like to say, and to end on a really good note, because a lot of times with mental illness, and I've talked to this about somebody at NAMI as well, um, you feel like there is no hope, but there is. And so I want to finish on a good note, because kind of like what you were saying too, this is not something that's going to be cured. It's not something there's a solution. But Luca had so many friends in high school. He had, in this picture here, which also has this one, he was employee of the month. And this was the month he died, or he died in April and it was for March. But he, despite all of it, he still loved people, and people loved him. And Whataburger named him Employee of the Month. They, for his funeral, even though he was not his beautiful, stellar, 100% self, I booked a church. I thought there might be 50 people because he didn't have a lot of people in his life. Over 400 people came. I didn't even know it. They said there was no parking. There was a line to come in. The lives that he had touched. And I got so much feedback because I spoke about mental illness at his funeral. I put it in his obituary, and so many people thanked me for not making his death him or his mental illness him. He's a person. He is not his mental illness. And he was a beautiful person, even in the mental illness. And that is what he ended with. And if I could say something to a parent going through this, your child is going through one of the hardest things. I know you wish you could take it from them, but you can't. Just love them. Remember they're in there and be proud of them, even if they get up on time, for the little things. It's going to be a different life, and that's okay. It can still be a good life. And I feel, despite it all, that my sons have a good life and they're loved. So I thank you so much, Marty, for being a light to other parents, for doing this, for having me on. It's very good to speak about them. My biggest thing is I want them to always live on, even Luca. He's not his death or his mental illness. He's
No,
beautiful, and I'm thankful. I'm just so thankful I was his mom. So
that's wonderful. And thank you for sharing this. I know it's still very fresh and raw. It's not that long ago, so I
yeah.
appreciate that. And I appreciate you being so honest and candid about this. I know mental health, like we said, there's so much stigma tied to it, but I think more people talking about it and more people being honest about it is going to help to break that stigma down. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marty. You're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.